My fingers were wrapped so tight around the linen napkin in my lap that the fabric had gone damp with sweat. Around the table, 12 mismatched Mother's Day plates sat untouched. Nobody was eating anymore. My mother leaned across the centerpiece, a bouquet of white lilies I'd paid for, until I could smell the mimosa on her breath. She didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. "I wish," she said, slow enough that every syllable landed like a stone dropping into still water, "that you had never been my daughter." Somewhere down the table, a fork clinked against porcelain. Nobody looked up. Nobody defended me. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I just sat there, napkin crushed in my fist, staring at a woman I had spent 42 years trying to make proud. And for the first time in my life, I understood that I wasn't looking at my mother anymore. I was looking at my opponent. My name is Rachel Whitfield. I'm 42 years old, and 16 years ago I started a business out of the trunk of a 2009 Honda Civic with $3,000 in savings and a folding table I used as a desk. That business, Harlow Design Group, now brings in $4.2 million a year staging homes and managing high-end residential renovations across 3 states. I built it while raising 2 kids, while my husband Daniel worked night shifts as a paramedic, while I answered emails from a hospital waiting room the week my father died. I tell you this not to brag, but because you need to understand what was actually at stake that Mother's Day. 6 years earlier, I had co-signed a $180,000 loan so my mother, Carol, could move into Bright Lawn Senior Residences, a well-regarded assisted living facility 40 minutes from my house. I covered $4,500 a month out of pocket for her care, on top of that loan, because my mother had never saved a dollar in her life and had made peace with the idea that I always would. My younger sister, Denise, 38, owned a boutique clothing store that had never once turned a profit. Her husband, Marcus, worked as an accountant, a detail that will matter enormously in about 4 minutes. I loved my family. I would have done anything for them. That's exactly why what happened next worked as well as it did. I'd arrived 90 minutes early to help set up Mother's Day lunch, the way I always did. The kitchen door was propped open, and I heard Denise's voice before I saw her. Bright, syrupy, the voice she used when she thought no one important was listening. "She'll never even check the account," Denise was saying. "She's too busy playing CEO to notice 4 figures moving around." I stopped in the hallway, one hand on the doorframe. "Just don't let her see the receipt from Cancun," my mother said, and I heard the clink of her wedding ring against a wine glass. "Tell her it was for physical therapy." I looked down at my sister's wrist as she came around the corner a moment later. A Cartier Love bracelet, new, still with that faint jewelry store shine, catching the light as she reached for a serving spoon. She smiled at me like nothing in the world was wrong. "Rachel, you're early," she said. "Mom, doesn't she look tired?" I smiled back. "I'm fine," I said. I was not fine. I was doing math. That night, I opened the banking app for the joint account I funded for my mother's care. Buried between a pharmacy charge and Bright Lawn's monthly invoice was a transfer. $22,000, memo line reading family support, Denise boutique renovation. She never sent the invoice. I let it go. Out loud anyway. Quietly, I drove past her boutique the following week and found a notice taped to the glass door. Notice of lease default. The store was 3 months behind on rent. There was no mobility unit. There was a new espresso machine in the window display and, tagged in a since-deleted Instagram story I'd screenshotted just in time, a beachfront cabana in Cancun. A month later, I stopped by my mother's lawyer's office to update her medical directive routine, something I'd done every year since her diagnosis with early-stage arthritis made forms harder for her to manage. The receptionist, new and unaware I wasn't supposed to see it, handed me the wrong folder. Inside was a fully executed power of attorney and updated will, dated 6 weeks prior, naming Denise as sole executor and sole beneficiary of my mother's estate. An estate I had personally funded for 6 years. I confronted my mother that Sunday, calm, direct. She barely looked up from her crossword. "It's just estate rebalancing, Rachel. For tax efficiency. You have your own money. Denise needs the security." The lawyer who drafted it, I learned with one phone call to the county clerk's office, was a college friend of Marcus's, and buried in a second search also served as outside billing counsel for Brightlawn Senior Residences. The same facility my mother lived in. The same facility I paid $4,500 a month to. That wasn't rebalancing. That was a closed loop and I was the only one outside it. 3 years earlier, on Denise's recommendation, I'd hired Marcus's firm to help manage the books for Harlow Design Group during a growth spurt. I trusted him. He was family. I pulled our quarterly reconciliations myself for the first time in 2 years and found what I should have found much sooner. A pattern of inflated vendor invoices, small enough to hide inside a $4.2 million revenue stream, routed to a shell entity called Meridian Consulting Solutions LLC. When I asked Marcus about it over coffee, his answer came fast, rehearsed, glossy with jargon. That's just receivables float reconciliation, Rachel. Standard practice for smoothing quarterly variance. I can walk you through the ledger anytime. He never walked me through anything. I hired an independent forensic accountant the next week, under a different name, paid in cash. What she found 3 weeks later made my hands shake for the first time in this entire ordeal. $95,000 embezzled over 26 months, funneled straight into Meridian Consulting, which public records showed was registered to Denise. The final piece came by accident. I'd left my phone recording in my purse after a voice memo for a client call, forgotten on the kitchen counter during a family dinner at my mother's. I found it later, still running 40 minutes of ambient audio I never meant to capture. She's so gullible, Denise was saying, laughing, ice clinking in a glass. She thinks she's so smart with her little spreadsheets, and meanwhile we're bleeding her dry. She'll believe anything if you cry a little, my mother said. Always has. Ever since she was small. Marcus's voice smug. Once the will clears probate, none of it'll matter anyway. She'll never see a dime and she won't even know why. I sat in my car in my mother's driveway and listened to it twice. Then I drove home and told Daniel everything. I made a decision that night. I was going to disappear into a version of myself they already believed in. They thought I was too busy, too trusting, too soft to ever look closely. So I gave them more of that, Rachel, not less. I started forgetting things on purpose. I'd call my mother and ask the same question I'd asked the day before. I let my hand tremble slightly when I signed for the valet. I wore an old cardigan with a coffee stain to Sunday lunch instead of my usual blazer. Let my hair go a day unwashed. Walked half a step slower than I needed to. Oh, I don't know, I'd say, blinking when Denise asked about the business. Daniel handles most of that side now. It's all so much. Internally, I was running numbers with the precision of a surgeon. If they believe I'm slipping, they'll stop being careful. People don't lie carefully to someone they've already dismissed. I let Denise help reorganize a folder of financial documents I no longer needed. I let my mother pat my hand and say, "You've always worked too hard, sweetheart. Let us worry about things now." Every time she said it, I smiled the way a woman with nothing left to hide would smile. I built the bait carefully. A single-page document drafted by my real attorney but never filed, showing my full transfer of decision-making control over Harlow Design Group and a $2.3 million share of my estate to Denise. In light of Rachel's declining capacity, I left it, seemingly forgotten, in the unlocked bottom drawer of my home office desk, the drawer Denise had reorganized twice already. I installed a small camera inside a digital photo frame on the office bookshelf, angled at the desk. I linked it to my phone. 2 days later, my mother asked to drop by just to check on me. She brought Denise. I made tea, excused myself to the bathroom, and left them alone in the office for 11 minutes. My phone buzzed in my cardigan pocket while I stood at the sink, hands perfectly still under the running water. Motion detected. I watched Liv as Denise opened the bottom drawer, found the folder and read it twice. I watched my mother lean over her shoulder and whisper, "Don't say anything yet. Let her think it's her idea." I dried my hands, walked back in, and asked if anyone wanted more tea. My parents' 40th wedding anniversary dinner, 30 guests, a private room at the same restaurant where my mother had once celebrated my college graduation, became the stage neither of them knew they'd built for me. Marcus stood first, champagne in hand, and raised a toast that started as sentiment and turned, halfway through, into something else. And of course, we're so glad Denise has stepped up to help manage some of the, let's say, more complicated family matters, now that Rachel's had a hard time keeping up. Laughter. My mother nodded along. Denise touched the Cartier bracelet at her wrist and said, loud enough for the table to hear, "Family takes care of family, right, Rachel? Even when someone can't take care of herself." I stood. I didn't raise my voice. "Family does take care of family," I said. "Let's talk about how." I set my phone on the table and pressed play. Denise's voice filled the room. "She's so gullible. We're bleeding her dry." Then my mother's. "She'll believe anything if you cry a little." I laid the forensic accountant's report on the table next. $95,000, 26 months, Meridian Consulting. I laid the will beside it, and the Bright Lawn billing conflict beside that. I spoke each fact once in order without flourish, the way you'd read a grocery list. "Marcus embezzled $95,000 from my company," I said. "Denise spent $22,000 of my mother's care fund on a vacation and called it physical therapy. Mom signed a will naming Denise sole heir, drafted by the same lawyer who handles kickbacks at the facility I pay for. And 11 minutes ago in my office, you two tried to steal my company using a fake document I planted specifically to watch you do it." The room had gone silent enough to hear the ice settle in someone's glass. Two detectives from the County Financial Crimes Unit, tipped off by my attorney a week prior, waiting outside on my instruction, walked in on cue and asked Marcus to step outside with them. I reached across the table and picked up the same white linen napkin my mother had used to wipe her mouth after telling me she wished I'd never been born. I folded it once, twice, and set it down flat in front of her, smoothed with both hands, the way you close a book you're finished with. "Happy anniversary, Mom," I said, and sat back down. Marcus was charged with felony embezzlement 3 weeks later. Facing $95,000 in restitution and up to 7 years, he pled to a lesser charge and received 18 months, along with a lifetime professional ban from practicing accountancy in the state. Denise's boutique was formally repossessed for lease default within the month. Her marriage to Marcus, already fractured by the arrest, ended in divorce filings by early autumn. Her old friend group, most of whom had watched the anniversary dinner unfold in horrified silence, quietly stopped inviting her to anything. Brightlawn Senior Residences launched an internal compliance investigation after I formally reported the billing conflict of interest. The facility's director of finance was terminated within 6 weeks. My mother's lawyer was referred to the state bar for review. My mother was never charged with anything. The law has no statute for what she did to me. But her name, once synonymous with warmth at every church potluck and school fundraiser, became something people said carefully, glancing sideways in a town that talks. I did one more thing before I closed that chapter. Denise's shop assistant, a 23-year-old named Priya who'd worked there for 2 years and had nothing to do with any of it, lost her job the same week her rent was due. I called her myself and offered her a marketing coordinator position at Harlow Design Group. She's been with us 14 months now. She's very good at her job. Some people in that family earned what came to them. Priya wasn't one of them. It was raining the night my mother showed up at my door, 7 weeks later. No umbrella. Her cardigan, the good one, the one she used to wear to church, was soaked through and hanging off one shoulder. She looked smaller than I remembered, standing on my porch in the dark, her hands empty for the first time in my whole life. "Rachel," she said, voice cracking, "I don't have anywhere else to go. I made mistakes. Please." I stood in the doorway, porch light catching the rain between us, and I felt nothing dramatic. No storm of rage, no flood of old love. Just quiet. "You told me you wished I'd never been your daughter," I said. "I believed you. I'm going to keep believing you." I closed the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't need to. Daniel was waiting in the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea already poured, steam curling up between us. He didn't ask what happened. He'd been listening from the hallway the whole time. "You okay?" he asked, sliding one mug toward me. "I am," I said, and for the first time in months I actually meant it. Here's what I learned, and I'll say it plainly. The people who count on your loyalty the most are sometimes the ones least willing to earn it. Love your family, but never let love be the reason you stop paying attention. Quiet, patient proof will always beat a loud accusation. Have you ever had to protect yourself from someone who was supposed to protect you? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. If this story hit home, hit like, subscribe for more real-life justice stories every week. And I'll see you in the next one.